This is, I think, going to be an interesting afternoon. Thank you, Perry, for the invitation, and Jackie and Ling for the collaboration. I'm excited and honored to kick off this theme of the future of work. I think it's a very complex and important topic that we'll be taking on this evening. As most of you know, I'm Roy. Together with Jackie and Ling, we'll be presenting some ideas and questions that we hope will prompt discussions and conversations that bring opportunity and possibility to each of you. I was born here in Edmonton, but raised on a ranch west of Grand Prairie. And as an only child growing up in near complete solitude, my best friends were all animals. We moved to Edmonton in the mid-'80s, and I graduated high school from Holy Trinity in Mill Woods. I didn't finish college. I instead chose to work full-time and entered the investment world, and where I spent 20 years, 15 of which in client-facing positions, and the last 5 as a portfolio manager, managing several private investment pools. I really chose in 2013 to resign from that industry because of my growth in understanding, I believe, human nature in our connection with nature. And working in the investment world did not align with that new way of desire. And so for the last 8-9 years, I've really been chasing my passions of sustainability. I truly believe that there are several companies that I've aligned myself with and that resonate with this idea that, you know, I should leave the planet in a better condition than I found it type of thinking. And presently, I'm employed at a small private company headquartered here at Edmonton. There's several innovative solutions for farmers facing agricultural challenges today, and the company is really in the beginning stages of increasing production for large-scale distribution of products that I believe will be game-changing in the agricultural industry. Now, my purpose over the next 5 to 10 minutes is to really share some broad ideas about the future of work, and the majority of which are really inspirations from others. And I've prepared a resource slide that I really do encourage you to follow the rabbit trail of some of these thoughts and inspirations. The future of work, I believe, will be high-tech, creative, and mostly digital. And speaking of digital, I need screen sharing enabled, please.
Yeah, you can share. As long as there's only one sharing at a time, you can go on.
It's giving me a disable participant notification.
Try now.
There we go.
Thank you. We got it.
Does that look all right?
Yep.
Perfect.
Let's keep moving.
Perfect. You know, Einstein is well known for his incredible contribution to science understanding, specifically his theory of relativity. However, Einstein had genius insights into everyday living that's demonstrated uniquely through the manner in which he published his theory of happiness. A calm and modest life brings more happiness than the pursuit of success and the constant restlessness that accompanies it. In 2017, the hotel stationery note that was written on was sold, making the grandson of the bellboy Einstein gave it to 95 years earlier $1.5 million. You know, I believe the future of work will be high-tech, creative, and mostly digital. We live on a finite planet within an infinite galaxy. Important conversations, discussions, and decisions are inevitable if we are to maintain or improve the standard of living for the majority of people on this planet. The elephant in the room, climate change, is sure to ruffle some feathers. Whatever your perspective on climate change is, please refrain from making that a topic tonight. It isn't. I believe the future of work will be high-tech, creative, and mostly digital, regardless of whether the increasingly severe weather is occurring because of man or nature. Time. The future, past, present. Time can be a confusing topic many people rarely explore. It's generally accepted by society that we are living in 2021 AD, in Latin, Anno Domini, year of. One way of looking at it, we are 101 generations from when we started counting. The Dark Ages ended around 500 years ago, or 25 generations ago. And wow, think of all the game-changing innovations of the last 60 years, or just 3 generations. The cell phone, internet, 3D printers have revolutionized work for all of us in the last 30. There are many conversations occurring right now, conversations that have never been held on our planet before. And they're occurring more broadly and more rapidly than at any other point in our existence. We are evolving at an incredible rate. I believe that consciousness on a global level and individual level is upgrading at an accelerating rate. I invite us tonight that we avoid the conversations focused on who or what is to blame for our present condition, and strive to invest our energy into conversations about a better future for all of us. Many believe the invention of the printing press in the late 1400s symbolizes the end of the Dark Ages. That was just 500 years ago, just 25 generations ago. It was around 420 years ago when Francis Bacon, a member of Parliament and Queen's Council, said, "The human understanding, once adopted an opinion, draws all things else to support and agree with it. And though there be a greater number and weight of instances to be found on the other side, yet these it either neglects or despises, or some by else distinction sets aside and rejects, in order that by this great and pernicious predetermination the authority of its former conclusion may remain inviolate." I think it's very important to avoid being absolutely certain about anything. Intelligence is knowing the level of one's ignorance. For many of us, our parents and grandparents identified their value with being tied to how they generated income. What they did for work shaped their identity. For many of us, it remains so. However, it is becoming less so. That change is certainly ruffling feathers as society confronts new realizations. At this tumultuous time, we are grappling with new information, new understandings, and new knowledge about our planet, our bodies, and all of nature. While past economists have always welcomed a reduction in marginal cost, they've never anticipated the possibility of a technological revolution that brings marginal costs to near zero, making goods and services nearly free and abundant and no longer subject to market forces. The OECD, a group of 37 nations from around the world, which represents the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, have evolved their purpose as our evolution quickens. In 1960, we achieved highest sustainable rate of growth. And this year, create regenerative and distributive economies that enable humanity to thrive, whether or not they grow. It's an evolution of thought. My perspective, Roy's perspective, what filters my environment is what I'm looking at. My perspective is what filters my environment. revealing what it is that I'm looking for. My perspective is formed from my beliefs, my experiences, and my state of being. Big picture perspective, right now there are tens of millions of people around the world who are faced with looking for work and generating income in ways that are novel to them during a pandemic. I believe the future of work will be high-tech, creative, and mostly digital. No matter what you do for work, your habits will be the biggest factor contributing to your level of fulfillment and happiness. Habits of thought, health habits, unconscious habits, how you manage your habits has a tremendous impact on your work. I guarantee the future of work will require habits that we haven't developed yet. Of all the things I've learned, I think the most important thing is that I know very little. The next important thing I'm beginning to learn is about my brain, how it works, what it needs to function optimally. No matter what you do for work, I think it's important to know, and not just brain surgeons. There are more people looking for work today than at any other time in our history. This conversation about the future of work is massively important. I believe that we will not solve our present problems with our present thinking. We need to be open to new ideas. They will challenge us and provoke us. I think stepping outside one's comfort zone is courageous and a critical component of thriving as a human. Remember that our history has revealed that we are often slow to accept change. In 1878, the British Parliament Committee said that Edison's light bulb was good enough for our transatlantic friends, but unworthy of attention of a practical or scientific man. Similarly, the chief engineer for the British Post Office said, the subdivision of electric light is an absolute igneous fetus. In other words, a fairy tale, a sham. And in the 1920s, speaking of the radio, the wireless music box has no imaginable commercial value. Who would pay for a message sent to nobody in particular? There is a new thought, a new ideology of economics that revolves around donut economics, and I am newly learning about it, and I appreciate the learning that I've had since taking on this opportunity to present to you today. And I welcome discussions, and at this point, open the door to discussion.
You're muted.
Yeah, you're muted, Perry.
Jackie, do you want to take questions now, or would you rather go through all three presentations and manage time? We may manage time a little better that way.
Yeah.
Do you think, does anyone have a burning question? Or, because what Roy just said leads nicely into what I'm going to say. So unless anyone...
Maybe we could go ahead then. And
you want to do that?
Yeah,
sure.
I think that makes sense.
The one thing, Roy, for later, your donut circle, I'm going to show one as well. And so we might pull those slides up again for people to see later. So
for sure.
I know I have a question about your circle. So, so Claire, while I'm introducing, let me just see. Oh, I can share. Perfect.
Yeah, I've got multiples on there, so.
Nice. So let me get mine up so I don't have to worry about that. So can you see my slide?
Yes.
My name all over it. So I just wanted to introduce myself, and just as Roy had done, and we didn't compare notes before we talked, and it's nice how it's all flowing in. So Roy took the big picture. I'm going to take the middle, and Ling's going to wrap it up with a specific example. The quote I like to use from William Gibson, which was from the 1990s, "The future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed." And part of the point of view that I'm going to take through the next 5 or 10 minutes is from an adult learning point of view and school children's point of view in terms of education. And we can see where the future may be if we only look. And just as Roy gave a couple examples about the light bulb and when people said, oh, that'll never work in whatever example you want from the past, I'm encouraging you as well to see it like it is working in some places. It could possibly be bigger, it could possibly be a different variation, but there are things that are out there right now that I want to point out to you in terms of the future of work. And a little bit about myself. I liked Roy's introduction, and I'll save mine actually for the end. I have a slide where I'm going to talk about what I do, but part of the future of work and what Roy just said about how many people are looking for work in a novel way, I'm in the exact same boat. And so it's not just them and those others around the world, it's us, it's our local community, it's either those people that are on the phone call right now, or the people that we know, or the people that we used to work with, or the communities that we're in. And so solving the problem becomes essential for ourselves, not just in the big global picture, but also very local, very specific. And so one of the things that I want to consider is lifelong learning. And as we've all alluded to, and Perry, you say it all the time, you know, we're always learning. Entrepreneurs are always figuring out what the next angle of their business is, what's the next critical need of their customers. And so learning isn't just meant for the schoolroom. And I selected this image of the chalkboard that you have in the background there and this paper hardcover book. And one of the things, just like the light bulb example, some of the things that we use to symbolize learning don't even exist anymore. The chalkboard, maybe in some school somewhere it is, but it's digital. And even some of our digital tools try to represent what we all know was a chalkboard, but maybe the next generation after us doesn't even know what a chalk on a green chalkboard might be. Or the next generation after the next doesn't know what a hardcover book is, where you used to just study from the text and the teacher would teach from the text. So there's a lifelong learning path going from your schools in your childhood through possibly university or college training or on-the-job training in your early career. And just as soon as you get comfortable with what you think you've finished learning, you've got it and you've got the job that you want, something will be guaranteed to change. And so we're seeing people in their mid-career or post-career having to come back for one reason or another. The crisis of the pandemic this year is just one example, but it happens all the time. It just doesn't always happen to all the people all the time at the same moment. And that's one of the main things that the pandemic has surfaced is it's happening to everybody. And another phrase that I think is really well worth repeating, we've been saying we're all in it together, we're in the same boat, but we're in the same storm possibly, but we're probably in different boats. So how you manage your own boat, your own community, your own needs locally may be similar to some of the others and may be completely different, but we're all definitely in the storm. And depending on who you listen to, this is not the first one. And so getting ready and being ready for what's happening next change can start at school for the children. And so the one example that I'm going to give to you just for research later, for those of you that are interested in what's going on with schools for children, this is a fellow colleague of mine. She runs a consulting company on helping people build micro schools. And the simplest explanation about what a micro school is a single teacher teaching to a cohort of students, anywhere between 5, 10, or 15, of multiple ages, of multiple backgrounds. And it is based on the whole learning experience of the child. So really turning the classroom around, as we've heard so many different ways. And so that micro school, I love it. When I first met her, goes back to that single room schoolhouse with a single teacher teaching all of the kids in the community. And so again, she's got a series of videos. If you search for this in YouTube, you'll see Micro Skill Builder. She's got lots of interviews up there for how teachers, predominantly in the States, but around the world, are taking back the classroom on behalf of the student, on behalf of what the children need to learn in the way that children want to learn, and as we're all saying, so that they can be effective and productive and well-rounded adults as they get into the workplace. I like the idea of the single teacher leading a cohort of learners at the adult point of view for, you know, what do we need to know now? So last week we were talking about entrepreneurialism and what do entrepreneurs need to learn? Can you teach entrepreneurialism? And the answer ultimately becomes yes. The how of it is possibly different. And here's again a list of some resources for you in terms of others. There's tons of people talking about the future of work. I went to the Future of Work 10 years ago, and they had put out a book, The 2020 Workplace, 10 years ago, and made some predictions and said, here's what we predict is going to happen in the next 10 years. I haven't looked at it closely about the pandemic. I don't think that they had that in there. But now that Roy is saying, you know, we're digital, we're working in different ways in different places. And the excerpt that you've got up here in terms of the question from the People Analytics Future of Work article in terms of the workforce, I really want to highlight the question that we all need to be answering, and it's probably different than how we would have answered 5 years ago. What is the work that needs to be done? So as an entrepreneur, as a business, small or large, corporate, as a government, as a university, what is the work that we are here to do? What is the work that needs to be done now and going forward? And being brave enough to answer it in a different way. Then get to, well, what is the capability and capacity of our workforce? And then get to what is the work plan, like how we're going to do it, and then finally, where are we going to do it? So I think the order of the questions become really significant. And again, there's lots of people out there. This is a quote from the workforce of the future. Perry highlighted in the newsletter the future economy from Canada's point of view in terms of the future work. There's great videos up there. And I do like McKinsey. They're based out of the States, but they're taking a global perspective. So you can find resources, whether it's local, in your backyard, or global, whichever perspective seems relevant for you and your needs. And the other phrase that I'll bring your attention to is talking about the employee experience. So we've had different phrases for this over time. In my 20 years of working in corporate as a learning manager, we were designing for the learner experience, and now all of those same principles are being applied to the employee experience. So it's not just learning in the classroom. You go to a workshop or you take a course as part of your on-the-job training. You're learning all the time. You're designing the work for the employee's experience. And as we were chatting before we started, what is the work? You know, we used to say it was in New York or it was in the Silicon Valley. What kind of work is that? What kind of experience was that? 10 years ago will be different than 10 years from now. Specifically, I'm going to give you some examples on the next couple slides from a course that I took. So I was laid off in the spring, and my first instinct was, well, I better take a course and figure out what's going on. So one of them was Theory U by Otto Scharmer. And what caught my attention for this particular course, I found it on edX, which is a multiple open or massive open online learning portal, which in a lot of cases is free or low charge, and it can be for charge up to as much as you want to pay. edX is just one of the very many of them. But Otto Scharmer came from a history with this book, The Fifth Discipline, which sort of coined the phrase the learning organization. Peter Senge, or Senji, wrote this book in the 90s, and it was the key book that I studied when I did my master's degree in terms of how an organization can set itself up to be a learning organization. And Otto Scharmer has taken it to the next level with his catchphrase, which I really liked, and it caught my eye enough that I took the course, leading from the future as it emerges. And so some of the concepts that Otto Scharmer has been talking about for 15 years have been from that edge, the future, and seeing what's emerging. So rather than looking to the past, we need to be looking for the future. We need to be listening differently. We need to be seeing differently. We need to be open and ready differently so that whatever future is wanting to emerge can be seen and you can grasp it. This model is the one I want to compare with the one that Roy put up. So several of the conversations that we were having in the past couple of weeks is really trying to think about all of these systems. So we're in this, if I can use the analogy of a tangled ball of yarn, where you can't just tip one system without tipping many others. So you can't just take a look at the healthcare system with a pandemic without impacting, obviously, the economics, without impacting the police or the city government or the local, provincial or federal government. So all of these things are intertwined, and pulling on one thread or cutting one thread through your ball of yarn ultimately impacts all of the other systems. So in this particular model, they call out 8 systems. And as Roy's squinting and I was squinting at yours, like, it's kind of interesting to see how people are naming all of our systems. And so that's one thing that we can say for later. It's well worth a deeper dive. And the other thing that he has pointed out is the different types of awareness. So back in the old days, we had a state-centric hierarchy and control, traditional awareness. Then in the past several decades, we've had an ecosystem awareness and a stakeholder awareness. And what was new and different about the Scharmer model through the Theory U was his presentation of the co-creative. So co-creating, working together for the future as it's emerging with the multiple systems helping each other rather than competing against each other. And he calls this the ecosystem awareness, seeing and acting from the whole. So again, taking a different perspective of what it means to be defining what is the whole system. It's not just the education system, it's not just the capitalism economy system, we're in a whole system. So again, I'm thrilled by what Roy put up there, because I wonder if they're kind of the same. It doesn't matter what we name them, we just need to get agreement on moving forward with the whole system. And the other specific example from this particular course, from this particular methodology and philosophy, is the listening. And again, it was new to me, and I teach listening skills and people and relating to others skills. So if you haven't heard of these types of listening, again, well worth a deeper dive on another call. The last one in the yellow here is generative. So from the future wanting to emerge, connecting and emerging both a shift in identity in self, not just for the individual, but for the leader, for the organization, for the community that we're in, for the economic, global government system, whatever you want to call it, nation, and really identifying ourselves as part of that whole. And so you listen differently. You listen to what the group is saying, in addition to what the individual is saying, and what that small group is saying is representing a larger group in the bigger system. And you hear it differently. For sure, you hear it differently. And that leads me to my final slide about who am I and what do I do. And so I saw in one of the other groups, we were listing off all our credentials. And so lots of times I just say I have a master's of education in corporate training, and it's not enough. So I have a Bachelor of Arts, I specialize in math and had a minor in English. And then people ask me, well, what am I gonna do with all that math? And I'm like, I don't know. And then so I thought, well, maybe I should be a teacher. So I got a Bachelor of Education. I taught high school in the late 90s. And then I decided maybe the classroom wasn't for me. And so I came to Calgary 20 years ago and did a software development technology diploma. Worked as a software developer for a few years and realized I like talking to people more than I like talking to computers. And so switched through my career for the past 20 years to teach technology, to teach customers how to use the technology, to be that person that is the liaison between the techie people and the leaders and the people who are less technical. And then ultimately doing my Master's of Education. And the peak of my career, which was about 10 years ago, in that particular role as a leadership development facilitator. And these are the skills that I'm bringing forth in my future in terms of what we talk about in terms of what are the things that we need to learn now. Keeping calming the mind and the body, reducing distractions, focusing clarity. Those were skills that leaders needed 10 years ago, and that's what I was teaching in facilitated workshops. Emotional awareness, whether you call that emotional IQ, empathy, all of these words kind of go under the heading of emotional awareness because we're reducing our negative responses and stress, you know, all those things about seeing it differently in terms of positive outlook, growth mindset, all of these words are in my heading awareness of your emotions, and especially during times of change. So we've always had issues with change, whether it was an organizational change that the leaders were bringing forth, or as we're experiencing now, an external force that's making us rethink everything. And ultimately, I think what's been revealed over the past year is, what are we doing in our communities? How are we including others? How are we creating a sense of belonging in the school systems, or whether it's in the workplace or in the larger nations? And what I did probably 5 or 6 years ago was including all of my credentials at the top there. I added another one and I became a yoga teacher. So I also teach yoga and meditation. And my ROIT 500 credential is something that I don't necessarily put up all the time, but I might, because it is the value that people are having that, again, 10 years ago, more years ago, maybe wasn't recognized. And now we're saying the words that I have on my page are the same words as what we used to teach to leaders in terms of leadership, team building. Now I'm calling it well-being. And we're putting it down to the individuals in work. We're putting it down to the children in high school. It's never too early to take care of your own self and to learn those skills. So that to me is the underlying theme of the future of work. What are we taking to our children? What are we learning in our school systems as we get ready and be prepared to work in the future? And just to reiterate my earlier quote, the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed, and we're getting data and information from all around the world, and it's probably in our own backyard and we haven't paid attention to it. And it's time to really think differently and be different with how we school ourselves, how we train ourselves, and how we see what we're doing in our work, how we measure our success in our work. And we'll take a few questions as we switch gears. What I really like about what Ling does is he's taken many of these things right down to his family and his business. So we'll segue into Ling's presentation. I'll stop sharing here. Anyone have a burning question?
I think we'll get to that. I'm seeing in the chat some interesting questions that will emerge that are, I think, relevant for all of this. So let's let Ling proceed, and then we'll start popping questions at you all.
Perfect.
Right,
Ling.
You're muted, Ling.
Okay, can I share my screen, please?
Claire, you're muted too if you want to answer him.
Yeah, you can share.
Okay, good.
So here's my screen. Really, I'm taking what Roy is saying and what Jackie is saying down to really just example I did myself to show, as a person, you can actually do something, this change on your own. You don't need to wait for other people to do it. So a couple of quotes, just seeing, we all know industry, society, business are changing so fast. We've never seen before. Fortune 500 company quickly disappear. Our skill is quickly disappear. According to the Dell CIO, if you're in the IT business, your skill set will be obsolete in 18 months. 18 months, think about that, okay? So most companies I talked to in the last 20 years have been changing their business a couple of times already. So what about the future? What do we know? I mean, so your guess, my guess, everybody's guess is as good as anybody else, unless you have an able. So I've actually thought about this myself, and instead of try to figure out, I think the best thing you can do is, just do it. So here's my experience. So I actually, the owner, founder, and operator of Technology North, IT company in Edmonton, incorporated in 1998. We started as IT consulting business focused on consulting, contract, IT services, application development. Like many IT services in Alberta, we're chasing IT contract, to catch up games and play the Me Too game. Oh, you do this, we do that too, right? So that's really what we did from 98 to 2010. And we experienced an up and a downs. I mean, everybody probably all familiar with in Alberta, many downturn since 2000, the dot-com bubble, 2004 mini burst, 2008, 14, 16, now 20, okay? In 2010, 2010, I decided to take Technology North into different directions. Simply, I want to diversify my income. I don't want to depend on my one customer. At one point, Technology North, we do about $2 million a year business. 95% of our income coming from one customer, the government of Alberta. So as you can tell, when government of Alberta having a cold, sneeze, we're really afraid. So that's really the original purpose, is try to diversify it. And so, we try to find different things to do. And what I decide to do something is do something close to your home, close to your heart, something you can learn about, something you can actually take care about, not something like, advanced technology or AI, something, there are so many people working on it. And let me just take care of something very, very small. So what we did is we're using our saving and diversify income to fund new initiative. And we have to deal with, learning curve. For example, from IT service to become an entrepreneur, it's a different game. So we really had to learn the game and learn the skill and learn how to deal with, staff deficiencies, revenues, skill sets, and all these kind of things. And again, if you are even in IT business, if you are in IT services versus entrepreneur or IT innovation, it's a totally different skill set. You're learning into different challenges. And as most of people on this chat room know, I have a child with autism. My youngest son, Brian, who is now 21 years old, was born in 2004. He was diagnosed with severe autism. So myself, I feel the pain about families and how do we deal with people with autism. And I have the experience with working with a school, government service provider, and then the whole spectrum. So 2010, I decided to, developing application to address children's services side. And in 2014, and when my son become, a little bit older and it's a high function, I start thinking about the future, which I start working on disability or autism employment sides. So in 2010, I simply asked a simple question is, how is a person with autism, especially in the high function, what does the life look like after high school? That was really the original questions. And boy, it took me a long time to figure out what it is. So during my, in the next few years, And while I'm on business trip overseas and meeting with different people, I often meet with service provider, government agencies, and the parents ask that question. And what we actually learned is 80 to 90% of artisans are either unemployed or underemployed. According to CDC report, 2.2% of a citizen over 18 years old is on autism spectrum. So that's really a huge number. Think about that. So meanwhile, I also have IT services, and I have a very difficulty to find and retain junior IT peoples. So one day I was thinking about this. I say, can people like Brian or my son can actually do the junior IT services? And I tested at home. It works really well. And then I asked the question, why it's not happening outside? So it took us a long time to figure out what it is. And we actually did a project, and we actually developed a very comprehensive framework on what it takes for business to hire people with autism. 2018, when my son graduated from high school, and I decided to take the framework myself, testing my own company as how that framework works. And once we tested, well, we actually found out it's not about just the framework, it's also more detailed in the logistics, how that works. And further, we developed something called Stakeholder Satisfaction Framework. So in summary, people with autism have three weakness or barrier. They most likely they have a verbal communication difficulty. They have attention disorders, and more importantly, for a sustainable job, there's employee or the paying customer satisfaction. And if you don't address these three issues, the job is never lasts. In fact, most of the parents told me their adult child had a job, lost a job because of one of these three reasons. So, and after we understand that, we actually develop the framework called Stakeholder Satisfaction Framework. And then we went to approach to IRAP, and we got some funding to start develop this application. 2018, so 2019, the end of 2019, while we design the application, we need a place to test it. And some of the business, previously promised us to help us test the application. And when we actually finally go to them to do testing, they all, check out because, people really don't know what to do, how to deal with people with autism. So I decided to create my own autism employment to test my software, which will create something called TN Digital Services. So TN Digital Services really is, we hire people with autism using our own tool called RoboCoach to overcome the barriers and help people on the spectrum to do document digitization in a digital economy. And actually we offer that as a service. We now have an accounting firm, law firm, and a government agency signing on as a client with us. We did from December 2019 to December 2020, and it's a very, very good business model. We actually did over $120,000 of business, and net margin was really, really good. Okay, so we have approving the business model, and even during the pandemic. So we actually have some PowerPoints and videos, and if anyone's interested in this group, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to share with you. And this is actually, just quickly some screens. This is the software screen, how people with autism are going to log into our software, address their well-being and their readiness to work. And the next screen is address how to helping them with attention disorder and manage performance while collecting data to satisfy employees or the paying customer. At the end of the day, it's a business, right? If people hire them, it's not making money, and that job never lasts. Well, our successful story is actually featured on all local TVs, international and national newspapers. And again, if you're interested, I'll be more than happy to share this with you. It's also on my LinkedIn profile. And I have included a couple of testimonials from parents, from service providers, and one quote from myself. So from December 2019 to December 2020, October 2020, we did over 200 box digitization for a local law firm at a competitive rate, competitive market price. Over 500,000 pages were digitized. We found zero. Actually, our customer did audit on our work. They found a zero error, no error at all. And that's even unheard, it's a record in that industry. Most people can achieve about 98% of accuracy, okay? And if you ever done any digitization, you know how difficult it is. So the benefits to our product, it's very clear. We can talk about hours, but it's a benefits for government, benefits for individuals, and creates a pathway for life independency, and creates an economy, personal economic contribution, and self-satisfaction, and yada yada, on and on and on. So what is the lesson learned? And so, like we said, we know what we know. What we know, we don't know what we don't know. So instead of trying to chasing out big things and playing the Me Too game, start something small, something close to you, something you are actually care about, okay? And diversify learning and pivot, and that's really just the key to do it. And I can talk hours of the failure we have. In fact, we tried multiple times and fail until the last thing we get some success. So instead of playing instead of playing the Me Too game in the red ocean, find something and stick with it. You never know. You may be the only whale in the blue ocean, like we are right now. Okay. So another big lesson I learned is profit is really the byproduct when you're solving a problem. If you're chasing profit, it never comes. That's really my, speaks the lesson I learned. So now we are actually a company with a clear mission, and our mission is to develop assistive technology for children, for autism spectrum, from children to youth and independence for the whole spectrum. We have a multiple project on the go. In fact, we just landed a federal government contract, which is very nicely, we are developing this technology and roll out across Canada in the next 3 years. So this is really my conclusion of the PowerPoint. I try to compress this in a very, very, like a 5 to 10 minutes. And I'm open for any questions. And if anyone's interested, utilize our service, do some advertising here. If you're interested, or you know people interested for digitization or data management services, I can tell you our team is the best team.
Okay, Jackie, do you want to take the lead and maybe direct questions to Jackie, and then we'll see if the panel wants to respond or anyone else.
For sure. I was just reading through some of the questions or comments in the chat. So Perry, you maybe had a little bit more time to read through them, but anyone we have the digital raise your hand in the participant panel, or we can go old fashioned and just look in the screens.
I'm going to throw a concept out.
Yeah.
It's like a hand grenade in the middle of this, because we've talked about systems, we've talked about the economy, we've talked about structure, we talked about education. Well, all of these things are how we organize supply. But what AI is bringing forward and what digital is doing is enabling us to now personalize what was once done in a mass way. Education as we built it was about kids sitting in front of a teacher in a structure called a classroom. But when you individualize service, you go to one-on-one tutoring, you go to individualized learning. Structures and systems and organizations have no relevance in a world of that nature, because everything is individualized in that structure. I don't know how far we go, but it seems to me organizations are having a hell of a time now that we're able to personalize and set expectations up that you as an individual have every right and systems can support you in a customized manner. That is a major overhaul of thinking about systems, structures, even economies. So I throw that out because the future of work, both the future I've touched on, and you have as well, will be different. It's changing very rapidly. And if it changes very rapidly, then how do you organize anything? You've got to really be responsive to what it is you're doing or who you're doing it for. And then work, I'm not sure that work as we have known it, whether it be labor or knowledge, or maybe in the future creating, I'm not sure work will be anything like what we have envisioned in the past. Okay, I throw all that out.
I'll take a few and then we'll see who else wants to add.
Go.
Okay,
Tom is raising his hand. Go, Tom.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Keep it short.
Okay. He always says that same thing, you know. Okay, really quickly. I worked with, and Ling knows this, I worked with, I have a company that produced apps, both iPhone apps and Android apps. And I had a staff member who was autistic for 6 years. And, you know, you have trade-offs working with somebody like that. And to really be blunt, I've often questioned myself why I kept him on, because at the end of the day, you don't have a really good communicator. You don't have a person that you can, at the end of the day, even know much about him. And thirdly, that will develop any sort of friendship between you and that person, because they're this isolated figure that comes to the office every day very precisely at 9 o'clock and leaves for lunch at 20 to 12 and then comes back at lunch 20 minutes later. And this routine is exact, but you just don't know what's going on in this person's mind. It's a different reality that an autistic person has. And it's very hard as an employer to deal with that and deal with the repercussions of not having a team, a full team working with you when you're a small entrepreneur with maybe 6 or 7 staff. And that was what I've often, but you know, I was often I was determined to protect him. So I kept him on, and he was brilliant at his work. There was nothing he could solve. I could farm him out to some people that had other technologies they were dealing with. He would sort them out. But as far as getting any words in a meeting and whatnot, or getting any feedback, or getting any sort of relationship happening, that was just not possible. So I feel very sad about the whole thing, and I feel it's really difficult to sort of define a way of getting past those personal feelings. And Ling, I'm sure you know all about that.
That's exactly how we try to solve this. In fact, I can share with you 4 people work for me from December 2019, 18 to 30 years old, 1 female, 3 male. None of them actually had a job. None of them had a paycheck. They start working for us on a random order. And so we interview about 20 people, select 3 plus my son. And today, when you talk to them, they are different people. They can chit chat with you. They can tell you how they feel. It's all about developing the confidence and give them the opportunity to develop themselves. See, the problem is, the challenge is when a person among with other neurotypical people, they feel so afraid. They've been locked down their entire life. They never had the opportunity to express themselves because they're so afraid of. But when they actually work among their peers, it's very different. That's all we try to do, is create an environment. All of them are the same. And, and we see the huge change.
Yeah, that is exactly what I did. I ended up having my other, and these guys are programmers. They're programmers, and they sort of sit in front and they create code, mostly for iPhones or for Android phones and what. We had some elaborate projects, but you know, the end result was that the person would have to be guided by another person who would communicate with me, and I'd ask them to sort of straighten out this stuff, and so they'd go off and talk technical talk and get the work done, you know. But I always had to get him to relate back to them to come to me, you know, instead of being able to manage directly. And that was some of the frustrations with all of that. But, you know, a friend of mine is employing the same fellow today, and he's doing fine. And the fellow gets on with his work, and we know how. And my wife's a therapist. I talked to her a million times about the frustrations I had, and she told me what I had to do to address this problem more directly and be more direct and more personal, and not stand above him, but sit down at his level and stuff like that. So I don't want to sidetrack the overall theme of this discussion, but this was a difficulty. And my brother has the same problem with his son too. So anyway, these are issues we should discuss offline.
So
And-
Bruce,
Do you have a comment?
Bruce, you've raised some issues on the chat. You want to pick up on any points you want to raise about the future of work?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just you know, bring my perspective. I mean, you know, we talked a lot about sort of tools and very like, you know, general themes about the future of work. But I think when it really gets down to it, I think that, you know, what a lot of people are concerned about is, you know, who's going to work, you know. So I think this is a really important and interesting question, right? So you know, I'm in the field, and so I'm building artificial intelligence. So those of you know about HealthGauge, we're building something called Health Coach. I mean, Health Coach is an automated doctor. You know, that's what it is, right? So, but it facilitates, or it's a coach. You know, and so, you know, ultimately, if I'm super successful, that, you know, eliminate all kinds of jobs in the health industry, right? But it also seems to me that this is the pinnacle of our technology. Everybody in the oil industry is figuring out how to eliminate work. Everybody in the education industry is working hard to figure out how to make teachers more effective. And technology is exponentially growing in capability. And so what we have to figure out is, and we have to figure this out fast, because if we don't figure it out, other areas, other regional areas are going to figure this out, and there go all the jobs, right? So I could, you know, talk at length about automation and how that's impacting society. So more of a, I don't have the answers, but I think that this needs to be part of the discussion of future work.
You're playing into, I mean, the word automation, to many people, they think about automation as it's we automate the kitchen now. We automate the assembly lines. But automation in AI is moving from automating muscle to automating the brain. What a doctor did is he knew something and he used his brain as the vehicle for his job. But AI is, as we replace the muscles with automation, so we're replacing the brain with AI and what you talk about. So the question then becomes, if automation is in fact displacing muscles and displacing the brain, what is next?
Yeah, the jobs that we have to think about are jobs that organize these systems, jobs that you know, and allow our human capabilities to be expanded by these machines. So the lawyers that are going to be successful in the future are not the lawyers that have individual roles. The lawyers that are going to be successful are ones that have intimate knowledge about how to use AI to amplify their lawyer capabilities, right? Doctors are going to have to figure out how to amplify their doctor capabilities by using systems and using machines. Even education, you know, think about, you know, so I was online on this massively online course, and it was, you know, it was a course, and there were 800,000 students registered in this one course that was taught by two people. Like two people taught the course. 800,000 students in one course. You know, how do you replicate that, right? With people, with classrooms, you can't. You can only do this in virtual environments. And so it's not even just about AI, but it's also just about the technology. Look at the session that we're having here right now. We've had this conference. If we weren't doing this online, we'd be in a hotel, and there'd be parking attendants, and there'd be people in the restaurant, and there'd be all these other people that would be being employed. None of that is happening. It's all because it's all completely virtualized. So it's a combination of AI and virtualization that is causing this, rapid shift. And therefore, we have to think about how we change work and how we value work too, because if you just have one lawyer that replaces all the other lawyers and you pay him $1,000 an hour and all the other lawyers are out of work, it's going to have a pretty interesting impact on the legal field.
I'd like to tag on to what Bruce is saying as well, Perry, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. To follow on what Bruce had said, the virtual conference world is projected to be $13.1 billion until 2027. And so when you take that into context, we've seen the live event industry crash essentially this decade. And we are now pivoting, of course, to learn how all industries, everybody has been force-marched online for online learning. And I want to remind everybody, that's what we're doing now. We're going to be having what we called a virtual lab on this on February 25th. But I'll get away from the self-promotion and say that thank you very much to Jackie and to Ling, for Jackie for giving us kind of a global perspective of how we're learning today, which is so important when we're looking at about virtual learning and for the future of work. And then Ling showing us how people are changing and pivoting so quickly to be fleet of foot. And maybe now is the time that we have to look after our passions, and have some empathy when it comes time to working around the world and chasing our global passions. In Ling's case, it was to help somebody with a disability, which is, maybe it's not a neuro disability, but it's a neuro different than some other type of neuro person. But he's followed his passion, and thank you, Ling, for having so much persistence over the years to bring this now to the availability of so many others. I also want to say that, and I'll get off my podium here, is to say maybe 200 years ago, before the First World War, when the world was an agricultural world and we were all farmers and building up our individual plots of land, maybe that was more normal as an entrepreneurial farmer. And then we had the First and Second World Wars, where these big IBMs of the world emerged, and we all became followers of each other. And now that those are tumbling down, maybe the entrepreneur of the future and those of us who follow our passions, maybe we're now more natural. Maybe this is now the natural society. The IBMs and the Shell Canadas and the oil industry and all of those big towers, maybe that wasn't such a natural state of being for the last 100 years, 150 years.
Well, maybe they were natural for the times. Maybe entrepreneurship is situational, and what we are as entrepreneurs depends upon the environment that we're functioning. We can't, as entrepreneurs, make the environment different. We need to be able to react to it. I think Bud makes that point over and over again, is entrepreneurs need to be adaptive, and that's one of their features.
Exactly. Somebody in the chat room talked about the digitization of one's expertise. And I've personally have been seeing that over and over again for the last decade. And individuals, particularly who are of retirement age, and they don't want to shut down the shop altogether, but they do have so much knowledge gathered and garnered over many, many decades. And in the last week alone, I've talked to 3 people who were in corporate life who are now finding themselves following the life of an entrepreneur. And we need to help them along, show them how to survive in that world.
I mean, I'll make one quick point there. The concept of retirement is ridiculous because it's an old concept. It implied, based on your age, there were certain things you could and couldn't do. And I think that's being proven false. And so retirement based on a certain age is dying. And I think that's what we're all aware of. When you look around this room that we're sitting in right now, Age is irrelevant in terms of the capacity to work in a knowledge economy and a creative economy. Maybe in a work-based or muscle-based economy, age was relevant, but we're in a whole new economy now.
I don't know if you know this, Perry, but the average age of an entrepreneur today is 64 years of age.
Yeah. Well, I'll be 64 shortly. Randy, Randy, you're muted. Go ahead, Randy.
I think Tom was talking, but I was looking to say something.
He already
too.
talked, so I'm going to
No, I just want to say a quick thing, Perry, please. You know, there's that book I mentioned to you called Successful Aging, which refers to just what you're talking about. And I think it's brilliant and you need to get it. The second thing is I really want to talk a little bit here, and I can let Randy go ahead. But I want to talk about this book by Scott Galloway, Professor Galloway from New York University. And he talks about, his book is called Post-Corona.
Can you put that in the chat? Can you simply notify all of us by putting that in the chat?
Yeah, I can do that. I just want to say that this guy's brilliant, and he talks about the Great Dispersion and how the job scene out there is just changing so rapidly. And you know, you wouldn't have companies like Skip the Dishes and some of these other companies doing so well if it wasn't for the changes that are going on so rapidly right now.
I spent this morning, Randy, and then I'll call on you. I spent this morning getting up at 5:45 to have a phone call with a company in Massachusetts. And that company has been centered in Silicon Valley. They do not have job descriptions. They do not have supervisors. They do not have structure. They are extremely nimble, and what their jobs are almost defined on a daily basis based on what their tasks. And the communication systems that exist are profound. They enable that individual to function as an individual in a large organization that is flat, nimble, and moving extremely fast.
Yeah, and that's what Scott Galloway is talking about, you know, and the thing is very critical of the education system where you've got, you know, like 1% of the population out there has 77% more of a chance getting into one of the high level universities, like Harvard and whatnot. So, you know, it's a great book.
Thanks, Tom. Put that up on the chat so we can all see it. Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, I saw Dale Alton had something he wanted to add to there too.
Let's
so,
go in order.
I'll start. The thing that was going through my mind on the chat was exactly to your point around you know, we're all on a journey and jobs are changing tremendously. Bruce and I have lots of great conversations around how many jobs will be eliminated or not. You know, my sense is that jobs are just changing in ways that we can't even fathom. And so we're entering, you know, this concept of the creative economy is going to continue to evolve. And I look at myself as example. I think everybody in the room here, and Perry, I think to me, you're just such a great example of how we should live, which is to stay engaged, to keep learning, to be an example. And so we're bringing on younger people in our organization. We're bringing on people from around the world. We work around the world. I mean, I swear every week, I think I'm talking to people in at least 6 to 10 different locations, and that's the new norm. But we're also really tightly connected in our community. And so we're going to co-locate with other companies, with other people, and we want those people to mix and mingle, both online and in person. And I think that those jobs will create themselves. What we have to do as we age is make sure we're creating organizations that actually support that ongoing learning and ability to create value over time. And that's what we're going to try to do.
You touched on something extremely interesting, which is you're in the world, you're in the globe. The boundaries are irrelevant to the work that you do. You could one moment be talking to someone in the United Emirates, or you could be talking to someone in Iran or China. If that's the case, and government is today, and organizations are defined by the structure, by the ground, that's becoming irrelevant as well. Why are we so limited? And it's a rhetorical question. By all of these historical boundaries that were drawn, when the world is in fact clearly functioning on a very fluid basis without regard to distance. Okay, Dale, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'd have to respond to the concept of fluid. I just want to thank everybody who's spoken. Incredible, like taking a fire hose of information, very esteemed group. And so as a Toastmaster style, I'm going to take 2 minutes to give you a bit of an overview of a different place that I see that may be a little bit disruptive to this conversation. Perry, you know that I was involved in job seeking, vocational education with people who are mentally handicapped, bringing them into different situations. In work domains, social domains, recreational domains, vocational domains, and personal domains, each one of those holds an ability to have actionable activity that can be socially validated as positive, whether that gets money or not money. So in that, we don't have a problem with having ability to work. We have a problem with how do we communicate what it is that we are going to work. You're absolutely right, we're global and we're local, but the whole concept of that local communication placement strategies that we have that allow us to actually do this interconnection is really afforded to those who are either technocrats or have the AI or are the Bezoses of the world. Really, when we look at what this needs to be put on, I'm sorry, I'm trying to make sure I don't overspeak here. We have to look really maybe at a little bit of a meta position to what we're dealing with here. And it is a moral, or I would call individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. Because I don't care, a gun can provide for a family, it can cause tragedy. So can entrepreneurship, so can all of these things we're talking about without having that construct. So what is it that we actually need as human beings? We need food, shelter, care, communication, and mobility. Those we can measure, and those we all need. Those are necessities. Any others, add them on, but those should be measurable. We have assets of individuals. We all know the people who have created, some of you are them, who are creating things, and because of your individual nature, you are inspiring. But we also need organizations and infrastructure, finance, which has really been totally overblown as an asset and has been corrupted to the point where it's done almost an MK Ultra on the way we think. And then creation, God's creation, environment, what we're working with and that we're stewards of. Finally, this whole concept of team, etc., dashboards, for a guy who's 67 years old, certainly not as educated as probably anybody on this group, I recognize for the average person, my mom needed a special clicker so she could work the remote, right? We also need to understand that we are bombarded with a communication placement strategy that's done by people that we have no representation with. And that's where we need to look more at that local, and I absolutely agree, that local connection is really where that comes out of. That's where you actually create the consumption or the creation of the necessities and optimize those assets of individuals and groups and infrastructure, etc. Finally, on this point, and to end, and I really want to thank you for listening,
You got
alliances are, sorry, am I over?
You got 10 seconds, go ahead.
Oh, I'm in. Alliances are what I'm going to bring out that I don't think have been really fully engaged, and I think, Julie, you brought that in. It is a ball of yarn, and so that whole concept of alliances is very important and needs to have abilities of different groups with different ideas with the same focus. And thank you for your time.
And now is the time.
Perry Shulak, I don't want to embarrass anybody by calling on someone who in the chat raised the point, and you raised the point about regional economies. Just a second, Tom. Regional economies.
Yeah, that's the thing, is a lot of times when we talk about AI, we're always looking at it from a North American perspective, and also from the perspective of those who operate within the technology realm and industry. In different regions such as China or India, their intent and use of AI could be completely different than what we're expecting, because they're under a different kind of cultural norms and rules. That's one point I would like to make. The other thing too, as well, is Alberta is not necessarily known as a cultural center. We've put a lot of, the UPC government has put a lot of dampening on the industry, and even though there seems to be a lot of noise coming out of Calgary, Edmonton is not exactly the most robust when it comes to creative outflow of soft human skills. And so a lot of our jobs are all driven by heavy manpower in and getting things done. So then are we going to be able to switch our economy, shift it? And how quick is it? How quick are we going to be in doing that?
So this is
I'd like to take a shot at answering that, if I may.
okay. Go ahead, Roy.
Valid perspective, Perry. Thank you for pointing that out. And I really think that it's about perspective. You know, I do think that Edmonton has a number of prominent software development companies that are producing amazing things and growing, you know, a few hundred employee type companies. And we think back to BioWare and companies like that. I think really it's about the current condition of our society, and the structures that we rely on are shifting dramatically quickly. And it's a change for all of us because we're all so connected now. I mean, there's now half the planet has one of these and can connect to anything almost. You know, there is some control and there is some management, like you mentioned, about culture, and what's the intention of their development of these tools because of their culture. You know, all cultures, I think, have their downfalls. I don't think there is a culture that should be ruling the planet. I think there's a lot of our people within these cultures that are just genuine human beings that love people, and we're all going to eventually connect in the right way that we're now in control. It's just going to happen when we get the right conversation and technology to take us there. That's a bigger question and a bigger topic than the future of work. But, you know, I think that there's a lot of great things that have been said today. I think that you can boil it down to your individual experience in life. And if you're looking for work, I think it's incredibly important to manage your habits of thought, your habits of being, and that when you really look at knowing that and managing that, that will affect not just your work, but your life, right?
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes. Jackie, do you want to say a few words, and then I'll do a wrap up, but I will have a question then. Go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's, to me, several of you have said things in different ways. And so I'll just sum up how I'm hearing it as a representation of my listening to the group. But part of what we're saying too is, so the elders of the community, whether you're 55, 65, 75, or 85, become the teachers, right? So as entrepreneurs, as people that are taking care of your children or grandchildren or other people in the industry that you had started, we are teachers looking back on the next generation, and some of that is personal and, you know, relational, and the technology and the AI is a tool that could help and supplement, but it still comes down to being human with each other. And just as what Roy was just saying from all of you, it depends on who you listen to. So the different cultures and the different ways of being and the different ideas that are coming out of the different countries, we're still Canadian, we're still Albertans, we should start in our own backyard. But there's plenty of other things that we can learn from other nations. So to me, that's that diversity, that inclusion, the sense of belonging to the planet, not just our own little pocket of it, and taking all the best of those mindsets. And so some of that thinking, those examples are out there, we just need to see it. And that's where I think it was Tom or somebody else, the idea of the curation. There's too much information, nobody can know. It's all been digitized, it's all on the internet somewhere, but how do you find the right thing at the right time for the right person? And that's where I think human teachers come in. So they may not be called the teacher, it's the leader, it's the parent, it's the elder, it's the senior consultant. Those the brain of the human still is the one that can say, oh, I know just what you need. Oh, I can relate. Oh, that sounds different, but I need to learn how to be different so that I can handle that, and include the people. Program the AI. It's only as good as the bias that gets programmed into the system, right? So some of that is still where we can be unique, and whether you're putting it into the computer or putting it into another person, it still is the responsibility of us to step up and lead the way. And over to you, Perry.
Perry, can I say a quick word, please? Perry?
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to say that you've been wonderful, Claire, and I just really enjoyed it, made lots of notes and everything like that. I just want to say this guy, Scott Caraway, you must get his book, because the thing is, he's talking about the next stage. And, you know, is this a time of opportunity or is this a time of chaos? And he's saying,
okay, we got 3 minutes, Tom. If you've got a book and an idea in that book, if
yeah, no, I'll send the book out to everybody, but
or I'll
you know,
include
his
it in the
final
next article.
statement, yeah, his final statement is that, you know, we have this opportunity, but, you know, we need to figure out what we want in this next rollout of our society and everything like that. He talks about after the Second World War, the American
Hey, Tom,
other
Tom,
governments went in
Tom,
just
Tom,
quick.
No, please, we've got to wrap it up. And I appreciate you have tremendous ideas, and I appreciate you sharing them. But if you could maybe put an article together or send a chat note of the book.
I'll send a chat note, and,
okay.
and his name.
Please. So it's been a fascinating discussion. Obviously, there's a lot of passion on the topic. Some of you have been very patient and great listeners, and others are passionate to share their ideas. So the array has been fascinating. But the topic, the future of work, has been interesting from several perspectives. First of all, there is an individual discussion of the future of work at the individual level, but there's also issues of the future of work at sort of an economic and macro and global level. And we've touched them both. Ling, in terms of how the future work will have a bearing at an individual level. Jackie, at how the future work will have an impact at an sort of the intermediary, the way systems will respond to meet the needs of individuals and supply. And almost spiritually, Roy, what you brought forward was this whole transition. We need to keep in mind that we as human beings on this earth have something to share. And that was what was interesting. Nobody really missed the point that the future work as an issue was about people. And that became, and that was the focus, even though what we're seeing, as Bruce has mentioned, is people are at risk as a byproduct of how technology is entering into society. And I don't mean risk. They're going to be confronted by change. And this discussion talked about over and over and over again, change. Our capacity as individuals to adapt, our capacity of our systems to adapt. And something I want to say in my wrap up here before I ask the question, I don't think once today, did anybody mention, nobody mentioned government. Congratulations. This is one of the first times I've witnessed a discussion where we didn't throw the problem at the government. And I don't mean the Alberta government or the federal government, but the concept of government at all. Most of the discussion was about what we can do and what we need to do ourselves. And the research that ABC Tech did, or that I was involved in a few years ago and continue to be involved in, says the fundamental challenges we face today are leadership and vision. If we're going to manage change at an individual and a collective level to make sure that the human race and we as individuals continue to see our needs met and our values echoed, it comes from bottom up. It's not going to come from top down. And Roy, I think you brought that out when you talked about spirituality. Okay, so that's my sum up. Thank you, Laura Bell, for listening, and all of you that have hung on. I mean, we had at maximum about 27, and that's double our numbers. Should we continue on the topic of the future of work for one more round? Get 3 more presenters. Maybe some of you would like to be presenters next session. This seemed to be a pretty strong dynamic. Should we do the show of hands, or just raise your thumb and your hands if you think this topic's rich enough to go one more round?
Definitely.
I think we got a majority there. Shirley, did your hand go up? Yeah. And Bruce, you maybe have another topic burning in your soul, but you're muted. So
well, I could certainly talk about the future of work as it relates to technology.
Okay. Jackie, would you be prepared then to take the overture of anyone who would like to be a presenter for next week and
Sure.
sort of bring that forward? So we'll let Jackie continue to lead this series. We have recorded this one, by the way, and we'll look for 3 presenters, and you can be the facilitator to lead them in a presentation. So that's what we'll do. I need an article that I use for marketing, as you saw. So anyone who has ideas or wants to share an article or comments with me, I'll draw on that material as I wake up Tuesday morning in a panic and what the hell am I going to do? And by breakfast time, I've got it. So Randy, Tom, Ling, Dale, Shirley, Bruce, Florabelle, Len, Randy, all of you, thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you in particular, Jackie, Roy, and Ling for sharing with us your ideas.
Perfect.
Thank you, Barry, for bringing.
In the chat, those I've had a couple people already. Those of you that are interested, let's talk on Monday. So email me so that I know who you are. JacquieClarke@gmail.com, and for sure, then I have your credentials as well. So. Perry, what if we have so many people we have to go to yet another one?
That's a different issue. I have no reason to not keep this series going. If it works and the people show up, Bill, you'll be here again. Mel, thank you very much for joining us, and Louise in particular. Thank you, Louise, for joining us as well. So all of you, good night and have a nice weekend.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Hey, Claire.